For years, I drained my bank account to keep my parents afloat, paying their bills, clearing their debts, even covering hospital stays. They always said they were broke, barely surviving. But one afternoon, I saw something I was never supposed to see. My dad laughing proudly, scrolling through a six-figure savings account. My stomach dropped. Had they been lying to me this entire time? What kind of parents pretend to be poor just to use their own daughter? Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who take us for granted. If you've ever given your all and still felt used, this story will speak to your heart. Stick around. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional revenge stories that stay with you. My name is Molly Anderson, and for most of my adult life, I believe being a good daughter meant putting my family first, no matter the cost. I'm 34 now, a licensed pharmacist living in Seattle. I've worked hard to build a stable life for myself. Ever since I was 20, I've lived independently. No roommates, no family handouts, no shortcuts. Just long shifts, student loans, and the kind of stress that builds character, as they say. I'm not glamorous. I don't wear designer clothes or drive a luxury car. I live in a modest one-bedroom apartment not far from the clinic where I work. I like routine early morning coffee, quiet bus rides, helping patients who often remind me why I chose this field in the first place. But under that calm exterior, I've been carrying a burden I never dared share with anyone. That burden was my parents. You see, my mom and dad, Linda and Gary, have always painted themselves as victims of circumstance. Job layoffs, bad luck, rising costs, every excuse under the sun. I remember growing up in a small, creaky house on the edge of Tacoma. We didn't have much. My mom clipped coupons, my dad fixed cars in our garage for extra cash. I didn't complain, we got by. But things changed after I left for college. I worked 2 jobs to afford school. No financial support from home, they said they couldn't help. So I took out loans, stayed up late studying, after night shifts, at a grocery store. When I graduated and finally landed a decent job, they started calling again. First, it was small things. Sweetie, our heater's broken, and we just can't afford repairs. Then came the medical bills. Your dad had another health scare, can you help us out? Eventually, it became expected. I paid off their credit cards, helped with their mortgage-covered prescriptions, even sent them grocery money. And I never said no. I told myself it was my duty, my way of giving back for the years they raised me. I told myself they really needed it, that they weren't taking advantage. They'd always say thank you. Sometimes my mom would cry and tell me I was their angel, their blessing, the only one they could count on. And honestly, that made me feel good, useful, like I mattered. But something never quite added up. For people who constantly claimed to be on the brink of financial ruin, they always had something new in the house. A fancy new recliner, a smart TV. Once when I visited, I noticed a brand new espresso machine sitting proudly on their kitchen counter. My mom laughed nervously and said it was a gift from a neighbor. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my parents were doing their best, that maybe they were getting by thanks to my help. After all, isn't that what family's for? Still, the doubt lingered. My younger brother Kyle moved across the country years ago and rarely called. He'd washed his hands of the whole situation early on, said they were manipulative. I thought he was cold and heartless for walking away. But now looking back, maybe he saw something I didn't. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. For over a decade, I poured tens of thousands of dollars into keeping them afloat. I skipped vacations. I worked holidays. I turned down social events because I was too tired or too broke. My friends always said I was too generous. Some even hinted that my parents might be milking me. But I brushed it off. They're family, I'd say. They need me. I believed that. Until the day everything changed. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon, one of those gray, rainy Seattle days where everything feels a little slower, a little softer. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off some medications I'd picked up for them. Nothing urgent, just my usual routine. A refill of Mom's thyroid pills. Dad's blood pressure meds, things they couldn't afford without my help. I knocked once and walked in like I always did. My dad was sitting at the dining room table, glasses perched low, on his nose, tapping on an old laptop. I called out, "Hey, Dad," but he didn't answer. He was too focused on the screen. Curious, I stepped closer, about to repeat myself until I saw the numbers. On his screen was a bank statement. At the top it read, "Current balance 274, 96.13." My breath caught in my throat. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misread it. But no, the number was still there. 6 digits. Clean, real. My father scrolled casually checking through transactions. There were deposits from investment accounts, interest payouts, even a note labeled "Second Property Mortgage Paid Off." My stomach churned. I backed away slowly and pretended I hadn't seen anything. "Hey, I'm just dropping off the meds," I said, my voice a little too high. "I'll leave them on the counter." He looked up finally and smiled. "Thanks, sweetheart. You're a lifesaver." The words hit me differently now, like a slap coated in honey. I left the house in a daze. The rain had picked up, but I barely noticed. My brain was spinning. $274,000. And they still took my money. Still let me pay for their groceries and hospital bills and overdue utilities. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what I'd just seen. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the account wasn't his. Maybe it belonged to someone else. But deep down, I knew the truth. I just didn't want to face it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying every moment from the past few years. The tearful phone calls, the guilt trips, the dramatic sighs about barely scraping by. It all suddenly felt like a carefully crafted performance. The next morning, I went back. This time, I didn't tiptoe around it. I walked straight in, sat down across from them, and said, "How long have you had over $250,000 sitting in your bank account?" They froze. My mom glanced at my dad, then back at me. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I saw it yesterday." I continued, "You didn't even try to hide it. All this time, you told me you were struggling, that you needed my help to survive. But that wasn't true. Was it?" My dad cleared his throat. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I snapped. "Because it looks exactly like you've been lying to me for years." Silence. And then my mother spoke. Calm, almost dismissive. "Molly, you wouldn't have had anything if we hadn't raised you. We gave you everything. Your education, your morals, your work ethic. The least you could do is help us in return." I stared at her in disbelief. "So you lied to me, manipulated me, took tens of thousands of dollars from me, and your justification is that you raised me?" Her voice didn't waver. "It's what daughters do. They take care of their parents. You should be proud you could." Something inside me cracked. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't the bank account. It was the entitlement in her tone. The way she spoke as if I were some kind of tool, an ATM that owed them for existing. I realized then they had never seen me as their daughter. Not really. I was an investment. One they expected to pay dividends for life. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. My mind went back to every skipped vacation, every sleepless night, every quiet yes when I should have said no. I'd sacrificed so much thinking I was doing the right thing. But they hadn't needed help. They'd needed control. And I had handed it to them on a silver platter. For days after that confrontation, I drifted through my life like a ghost. I still went to work. I still smiled at patients and checked prescriptions. But inside, I was hollow, numb, like something vital had been ripped out of me. I kept hearing my mother's voice, flat, almost bored, as she said, "It's what daughters do." That sentence haunted me, not because it was cruel, but because it was so matter-of-fact, like I was the one being irrational for finally questioning their behavior. I thought about how I used to stay late after work, picking up extra shifts just to send them money. I thought about the time I skipped my best friend's wedding in Hawaii because Mom had called crying about a surprise plumbing bill. That bill, I now realized, probably didn't even exist. And the thing that hurt the most, I wanted to help them. It wasn't about the money. It was about love, about duty, about doing the right thing. But they had taken that love and twisted it into obligation, into something ugly. One night, I sat on my bedroom floor with my old budget spreadsheet pulled up on my laptop. I scrolled through the entries year after year of payments to their mortgage company hospital bills, utility accounts I didn't even live in. The total made my chest tighten. 98 on $7 to $20. That's how much I'd given them since turning 22. Almost $100,000. Enough for a down payment on a house. Enough to pay off my own student loans. Enough to travel the world. Gone. I stared at that number until my eyes burned, not because of the money itself, but because every digit was a symbol of misplaced trust, of years I could never get back. And still, a part of me wanted to forgive them. That's the twisted thing about emotional manipulation. It trains you to doubt your own pain, to second-guess your own boundaries. I kept asking myself, am I overreacting? What if they really did struggle and just got lucky with some investments? So I did what I always do when I'm spiraling. I called my brother. Kyle picked up on the second ring. "Hey, stranger, I need to ask you something." I said, skipping the small talk. "Did you know about Mom and Dad?" There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. "Oh, you finally saw the light." I blinked. "What do you mean, Molly?" "I tried to tell you years ago. You remember that Thanksgiving I didn't come home? That wasn't because I was busy. It was because I found out they'd been hoarding money for years while crying poor to you." My heart sank. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "I did, or I tried to, but you were always defending them. You called me selfish." Remember, I closed my eyes. I did remember. I'd been so angry at him for pulling away, for not being there for the family. And now I saw the truth. He wasn't being cold. He was setting boundaries. I just didn't want to believe it, I murmured. None of us do. Because they're our parents. But Molly, you're not their daughter anymore. You're their safety net, their retirement plan. His words felt like a slap, not because they were wrong, but because they were so heartbreakingly accurate. That night, I lay awake in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every moment I'd confused guilt for love. Every time I'd sacrificed myself, hoping it would make them proud, only to be treated like I owed them more. And finally, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was done. Done justifying their behavior. Done shrinking myself to fit their narrative of the dutiful daughter, done pouring from a cup that was bone dry. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking, what do they need, and started asking, what do I deserve? And the answer was simple. Peace. The next weekend, I went back to my parents' house one last time. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, an apology maybe, a confession, even just an ounce of remorse. I think some part of me still needed closure, a reason to believe they hadn't completely abandoned their conscience. The house looked the same as always. Manicured lawn, porch swing, that ridiculous "home is where the heart is" sign Mom had nailed above the front door. She opened the door, beaming. "Molly, you didn't say you were coming." I stepped inside without returning the smile. "We need to talk." Dad was in the living room flipping through TV channels like it was just another lazy Saturday. I stood between them and took a breath. "I'm done," I said quietly. "No more money. No more paying your bills. No more anything." Mom blinked. "Excuse me, I know about the money. I saw the account. I know you're not broke. You never were. And I know you let me struggle for years while you sat on a fortune." Dad sighed. "Molly, you're being dramatic." "No," I cut him off. "I've been silent for too long. That ends now." Mom crossed her arms. "So what, you want us to grovel? Is that it?" I stared at her, stunned by how quickly her tone turned venomous. "You lied to me," I said slowly. "You made me believe you were desperate. I gave up everything to help you. And you let me. You took advantage of me." "We're your parents," she snapped. "That's not taking advantage. It's family. You owe us." There it was again. That entitlement. That casual cruelty disguised as tradition. "You raised me. You fed me. You put a roof over my head. And I'll always be grateful for that," I said. "But I don't owe you my life. I don't owe you financial servitude. That's not love, that's control." Dad turned off the TV and leaned forward. "So what now? You're cutting us off just like that?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "I've already contacted a lawyer. I've updated my financial accounts. You won't have access to anything of mine again." They stared at me, slack-jawed. For once, they had no script. No guilt trips, no sob stories, just silence. "I'm also seeking therapy," I added, "because I need to unlearn the idea that love equals sacrifice. And I need to heal." Mom's face hardened. "You're being selfish." "No," I said. "I've just finally learned how to be self-respecting." She scoffed and turned away. My dad muttered something under his breath, but I didn't hear it. I was already walking out the door. The sun had broken through the clouds as I stepped outside. A small thing, but it felt symbolic, like the universe was finally giving me permission to breathe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for their comfort. I didn't feel like I was failing someone by choosing myself. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. But freedom came with its own kind of grief. In the days that followed, I cried more than I expected. Not for the money, not for the years lost, but for the fantasy I had clung to for so long, that my parents were decent people doing their best, that they valued me not just for what I could do, but for who I was. That illusion was gone. A week later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note from my mother. "Molly, we didn't mean to hurt you. Life hasn't been easy for us. You'll understand one day when you have kids of your own. If you change your mind, we're here. Love, Mom." No apology, no ownership. Just more emotional bait wrapped in vague guilt. I tore the letter in half and dropped it in the trash. It was done. Still, the pain lingered, Emotional wounds take time. Some days, I missed the version of them I thought I had. Other days, I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. But slowly, I began to rebuild. I reconnected with old friends. I took myself on a weekend trip to the Oregon coast, my first vacation in 5 years. I let myself buy a new couch, guilt-free. I even started journaling again, writing down the things I'd never allowed myself to feel. Then one night, something unexpected happened. While scrolling through an alumni newsletter from my pharmacy school, I saw a blurb about a scholarship being discontinued due to lack of funding. I clicked on the link. It was for underprivileged students in healthcare, kids like I once was. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart thudding. And that's when the idea came. The idea came to me like a whisper, quiet but impossible to ignore. I kept thinking about that scholarship program, about how I'd once been that struggling student juggling textbooks and night shifts trying to scrape by. I remembered what it felt like to choose between rent and groceries, between focus and fatigue. And I remembered how no one helped me, not even the people who should have. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled out the financial spreadsheet again, the same one I had used to track every penny I'd given my parents over the years. I highlighted the total in bold 98 hours, $720. Then I opened a second tab, a new spreadsheet, a new name, the Anderson Resilience Fund. I was going to take everything they had stolen from me and give it to people who actually deserved help. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't going to slash their tires or expose them online. No, I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to erase their influence from my life entirely and transform that pain into purpose. First, I contacted my old university's financial aid department. I explained who I was, what I wanted to do, and how much I could contribute. I pledged $25,000 up front, my emergency savings, and promised to continue donating every year moving forward. The fund would support first-generation pharmacy students from low-income backgrounds. No strings attached, no guilt trips, no manipulation, just opportunity. When the announcement went live, they asked if I wanted my name listed publicly. I told them yes, but only as in memory of Molly Anderson's piece. It was symbolic. The girl I had once been, the girl who lived for approval, who bled herself dry for people who didn't deserve her, she was gone. And in her place stood someone reborn. But karma wasn't done yet. A few months later, I got a text from my dad. "Call me. It's important." I ignored it. Then came a voicemail from my mother, her voice trembling for real this time. "Molly, we made a mistake, a huge one. Your father invested in some real estate deals that went bad. We lost. We lost almost everything. The IRS is after us. We might lose the house." I sat there listening in silence, not angry, not triumphant, just calm. Because this was karma. Not the kind you scream about or force, but the kind that arrives when no one's watching, like a slow turning wheel finally coming full circle. They had spent decades manipulating me under the illusion of poverty. Now, they were genuinely broke and had no one left to turn to. 3 days later, they showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I opened the door just far enough to look them both in the eye. Their faces told me everything. Stress-lined, pale, hollow. The confident entitlement I had grown up with was gone, replaced by desperation. Molly. Mom began clutching her purse with white knuckles. We're not asking for much, just enough to get back on our feet, Dad added quickly. Just a loan? You know we'd pay you back. I raised an eyebrow. Like how I paid you for 12 years straight? They flinched. My voice was steady. Not cruel. Just honest. I'm sorry for what you're going through, I said. But I can't help you. You won't, you mean, Mom spat. No, I won't. Because I already did. I gave you my money, my time, my youth. And you used it to cushion your comfort while I struggled. Now it's your turn to figure things out just like I had to. Dad stepped forward. We're your parents. Yes, I said softly, and I was your daughter. But you lost that the day you saw me as a wallet instead of a person. I closed the door gently and locked it. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I simply walked back to my living room, sat down at my desk, and continued reviewing applications for my scholarship fund. Somewhere, a student was checking their inbox, finding out they'd received a full ride, that their dream wasn't over, that someone out there believed in them. That was where my energy belonged now. In the weeks that followed, I heard through Kyle that our parents had sold the house. They were living in a small rental outside the city, fighting off debt collectors and trying to adjust to life without handouts. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed easier. Sometimes justice doesn't come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes it comes quietly, with boundaries held, with dignity reclaimed, with silence in place of apology. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's refusing to be controlled by pain any longer. A year later, I stood on stage at the university's scholarship gala, reading the names of the first 10 students awarded by the Anderson Resilience Fund. They came from small towns, from broken homes, from stories that mirrored my own. One girl hugged me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "No one's ever believed in me before." I smiled and whispered back, "Now you do." That night, I realized I hadn't just walked away from something toxic. I had walked towards something better, something bigger. I'd taken pain and turned it into possibility, not just for me, but for others too. And my parents, I haven't seen them since they showed up at my door. Kyle says they still blame me for everything, refusing to see their own role in the mess they made. But I no longer need their recognition. I no longer chase their love like a starving child begging for crumbs. Because I've learned family is not defined by blood. It's defined by truth, by respect, by the willingness to lift each other without keeping score. And real love doesn't come with a price tag. On my birthday, I got a letter from one of the scholarship recipients. It ended with a single sentence I'll never forget. You changed my life, without asking anything in return. And in that moment, I finally understood I wasn't just the daughter they failed. I was the woman they underestimated. And I no longer needed revenge, because the life I built without them was justice enough.